Good Friday morning, everyone. I hope you had a chance to get outside this week. Right outside my window, the sun is shining through a beautiful matrix of golden maple leaves. And this has been just a fantastic fall for color here in Wisconsin. And so I hope you had a chance to get outside before this lecture to bask in the color and the sun, or I hope you have plans to get outside after the lecture or both. Regardless of where or when you're watching, I hope you get outside soon because, as we'll hear in a moment, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing for the weather. Today's episode is another bit of a change from the standard backyard wildlife as we talk about the domestic cat in episode 8 of season 2, Cat on a Hot Suburban Roof. The Backyard Naturalist series overall looks at the ordinary plants and animals in our backyards, and sometimes in this case in our houses, and reveals the extraordinary stories that they have to tell. This episode is brought to you by the UEC In My Backyard, which you can find on the Urban Ecology Center website. Some recent additions include another award-winning Story with Tori, award-winning because it's my favorite story video series where she reads the delightful book, The Best Beak in Booneroo Bay. And Chad and Kendall and their dog Pencil have another adventure outside, creating a beautiful mandala on the forest floor out of autumn leaves. A super cool episode of Chad the Nature Dad. And there's also a blog written by Peyton Buer, a UEC intern, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, where she gives a little bit of the science behind why this has been such a colorful fall here in Milwaukee, at least, and in Wisconsin. Also, I'm super excited that the UEC is co-hosting a talk by Robin Wall-Kimmerer, who we featured heavily in the Moss Baby episode a few weeks ago, and is just one of my favorite scientists and writers and people. She's the keynote speaker for the Wisconsin Association for Environmental Education, and her talk will be available to UEC members free of charge. I know spots were filling up very quickly, so if you want to hear her talk, which is tomorrow, Saturday, November 7th at 2 p.m. Central Time, please contact our membership manager, Glenna Holstein. And our trailer for today is from the UEC In My Backyard website. Some of you may need this. It's a couple minutes of pure joy, zen, and hopefully some stress relief for the current times, which I'm going to guess will benefit us all. So let's watch a quick video with Miguel and his adorable niños.
Hello, friends of the Urban Ecology Center. My name is Miguel. What's your name?
Dario.
What's your name?
Camila.
And today we're gonna go on a special walk around in our neighborhood. You can probably guess that it's the fall season. Look at those colors of the leaves. And we're gonna enjoy those rains of the year, of the season fall, in a very interesting way. We're gonna jump in the puddles. What about jumping in the puddle? Sounds like a plan?
Yeah.
Jumping in the puddle sounds like a plan? Excellent! There is no bad weather in Wisconsin. There is bad gear. And today we are prepared for it. We have rain boots and snow pants. We have a coat. We have gloves, a hat, and maybe a hot shower and hot chocolate.
Yeah.
Hot chocolate
Yeah.
will make the day for us today. Why don't you try it? Come on, let's jump in the puddles. Go, 1, 2, 3, go. Dario, Camila, did you have fun?
Yes.
Do you think that more people should try this?
Yes.
Tell them. It's your turn now.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Miguel and kids. A quick shout out to some of the bigger sources of information for today's episode. The Stuff You Should Know podcast, which has several episodes related to cats, and the Ologies with Allie Ward podcast, where she interviews Dr. Michael Delgado. And Robin, if you don't know about this one, you'd like it. It's a new great podcast called Stuff You Missed in History Class. It's not a new podcast, it's new to me. And they also had a great episode on cats. Okay, cats. So to many of us, they are a source of endless funny videos and memes, often a nice break from reality. And I will admit that I'm not a quote unquote cat person. It's not that I don't like cats. I do, but I just don't have the desire to cohabitate with them like I do with dogs. However, I do know a lot of wonderful people with cats, and I've met a lot of great cats, either personally or virtually. Mo and Sylvia Puglioli, Max Humboldt, Dove, Alice, and I'm going to stop because if I continue, I will certainly offend someone by not including their cats. But we had a cat when I was little, and I think it became too much for us, so it was sent away to the kitty farm. Not the figurative kitty farm for cats that leave this world prematurely. I think we really gave it away to someone who had a farm. But anyway, I am dedicating this episode to the only cat I really got close to in my lifetime, and that's Tashiki, seen here plotting his next move, and who lived a long life on the south side with Jenny and Joe, and was christened with the name Tashiki by our good friend Bryant Jones. At the beginning of season 1, back in April, when we were all learning what stay at home was going to look like and how we were going to survive a whole 3 weeks of it, I had several episodes on mammals. So if you want to revisit what it is that makes something a mammal, you can start with the 50 Shades of Grey Squirrel episode, and also take a look at iRabbit and the Faking Dead, an episode on the Virginia possum. In the episode All Coyote on the Western Front, I mentioned that cats and dogs are the two major groups in the order Carnivora. So this is mostly full of animals that are carnivores that specialize in eating other animals, but which also includes some omnivores and even herbivores like the giant panda. The biggest groups of carnivores are the felids, or cat-like mammals like this cheetah, and the canids, or the dog-like mammal like this jackal. Team dog also includes bears and seals. And for many years, there was some confusion as to where hyenas belong. And for a long time, hyenas were grouped with the dogs, but after further genetic analysis, they were lured into free agency by Team cat. And Team cat is also known as the suborder Feliformes, or looks like a cat. In addition to having cats and hyenas on the roster, they also have mongooses and linsangs and oyans and genets and civets, and some pretty intimidating extinct forms like smilodons and saber-toothed cats. But if you strip away all the cat-like creatures I just mentioned, you get down to the family Felidae, or the true cats. So this includes the wildcats and our domestic tabby cat. This group has an incredibly complex and diverse system of fur, although it's not the fur that gives you the allergies. It's parts of the skin and other things, but they have a diverse, complex system of fur. They have retractile claws, and they're all obligate carnivores, which means their digestive systems are really only capable of processing animal flesh, unlike dogs that can process both animal and plant matter to some degree. The cats are further grouped into genera by a pretty fun characteristic, whether they roar or purr. So the roaring cats include lions, tigers, leopards, and jaguars. And the ability to roar has to do with a smaller degree of ossification of the bones near the vocal cords. So that gives them the flexibility that allows for that resonance that comes with a roar. My neighbor here on 45th Street grew up across the park, across the street from the Washington Park Zoo. And when we moved in, she told us stories about sitting on the front patio here, drinking coffee to the background of the nearby lions roaring at the zoo. And those roars can travel great distances, and they have, social context in the form of communication. The purrs include cheetahs, which can't roar, mountain lions, and domestic cats. So none of these can roar. And in this group, the bones near their vocal cords are too rigid to create a roar, but that doesn't mean the cats on the right can't verbalize. So both groups of cats have a wide vocabulary of vocalizations, growls and meows, whimpers and hisses that allow for more complex communication, and they let you know their mood. And your house cat can tell you whether they're hungry, whether they want your attention, whether they're content or not too happy with you, just with simple changes in their vocalizations. Pumas are interesting. They can't roar, but their purr, if you listen to a puma purr, it's intimidating, and their kind of angry meow produces that iconic growl you hear in a lot of Hollywood movies right before it chases the main characters. Our house cat belongs to the genus Felis, which has 7 species. So there's the Chinese mountain cat from Western China, the adorable sand cat, which lives in the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula in Africa, including the Sahara Desert, by the way. The black-footed cat, which is a tiny wildcat from Southern Africa. There is the African wildcat and the jungle cat, which inhabits wetlands throughout Asia. But I'm going to single out this cat, which is the European wildcat, because this is the species that is the likely ancestor of all of our domestic cats. All of the breeds of house cats we see today likely came from this cat. And maybe the coolest thing about the European wildcat is its scientific name, which is Felis sylvestris. So tell me people weren't thinking about this cat in popular culture. Felis sylvestris. And from Felis sylvestris, we get the many breeds of house cats, which have the scientific name Felis catus, which, let's be honest, this sounds like a cop-out name. It's like the scientist who named this one was like turning out the lights in the lab, wanted to get home for dinner, and they're like, let's just call it, how about Felis catus? Or I don't know, it sounds like somebody who didn't study for their test just got the question, what's the scientific name for cat? And they were like, oh, crap. How about Felis catus? But in any case, Felis catus it is. And in the many stages of warfare between cats and dogs, there's no question about which pet is more popular in the United States, as there are 38 million households that have at least one cat in residence, making it, at least here, the undisputed most popular pet in the country. Worldwide, there is a cat in 1 out of every 3 households. And here's a crazy statistic. There are an estimated 600 million cats worldwide that someone identifies as their pet. There are another 600 million cats living independently, either as feral cats or as stray cats, meaning there's about 1.2 billion cats on Earth, and only half of them are considered someone's pet. So where did this long entangled relationship with humans begin? If you're like me, you instantly think of Egypt as the place where cats became domesticated. And although some believe that cats still aren't truly domesticated because of the process, it is true that there's a lot of archaeological evidence to support that strong relationship between ancient Egyptians and cats. So they were revered, they were worshipped, they were mummified. It's in the artwork. And there was even a cat deity called Bastat, which one of the podcasters said would make a great name for a cat. Bastat. Sounds powerful. But the thing is, the culture that we call ancient Egypt coalesced about 5,000 years ago. Yet there's evidence to support that the European wildcat started hanging out with humans about 12,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, as early humans were switching to agriculture, and they started storing grains. And the wildcat was likely attracted to the grain storage areas or silos because they attracted rats, which then became a reliable source of food for the wildcats. And at some point, humans recognized the value of having these mousers around to control the rodent populations, so much so that they started bringing them on ships as mousers to protect the stores of food. And by this time, you need to have some degree of domestication to convince a cat to come with you on a ship. Um, and the ships traveled around the world, and so did the cats. And pretty soon, you have cats following humans to every corner of the earth, primarily because of their ability to keep rodents in check. But there's no doubt that there were bonds forming between the humans and their mousers. In fact, on the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean Sea, there's evidence of a human interred next to a cat that dates back 9,500 years ago, again, likely brought over in a boat from mainland Turkey or Greece. And the evidence supports that they were buried together intentionally, not just accidentally, which likely could be because of a bond between the two, which brings cats into the ranks of a true pet. By the time the ancient Greeks or the ancient Egyptians are forming their bonds with cats, you also have evidence of domestication and reverence in Crete and India and other parts of the mainlands of Europe, Asia, and Africa. And there's evidence that cats actually made their way into ancient Egypt via the Ethiopians, who already had an established relationship with them. But there's strong evidence that in Egypt, they were revered as pets. There were cat cemeteries, and the penalty for killing a cat was death. The European settlers at Plymouth and Jamestown brought cats on their fateful journeys to the New World, and by this time, humans had already been selectively breeding cats for thousands of years for certain traits, and the breed that evolved from the mousers on the Mayflower and the other boats was the American Shorthair. So after dutifully performing their mousing duties on the voyage, they started spreading along the east coast of the Americas. And that's another thing about these early cats. There really wasn't such a thing as a house cat. It's likely that cats all around the world at this point had access to people's houses, but they had free or regular access to the outside to eat and to relieve themselves. There are rumors that Sir Isaac Newton created the cat door, but they are unfounded because, first of all, prototype kitty doors likely existed at the beginning in those grain storage areas from 12,000 years ago. Those early farmers wanted to make sure that the cats had access to those storage areas, and it's very likely they made sure there were openings for the cats to enter and exit. But the first specific written example of kitty doors are found in the Miller's Tale of the Canterbury Tales. And really, when I say cat door, I literally mean a hole cut into a door for the cats to come and go. So in the narrative of the Miller's Tale, a servant knocks on the miller's door but doesn't get an answer. So he peeks in through the cat hole, and the tale reads, "And hole he found full low upon a board, there as the cat was wont in for to creep, and at the hole he looked in full deep, and at the last he had of him a sight." So the Canterbury Tales are written in the 1390s, about 250 years before Isaac Newton was born. But there is apparently, or was apparently, in Sir Newton's adult house, a door with two holes of different sizes, a big one for the mama cat and a small one for the kittens, as if the kittens couldn't just pop through the mama hole. But I appreciate maybe the intended humor of Sir Isaac. And so another thing that all this reminds us of is that the idea of an indoor cat is extremely new. Up until about 1950, there really wasn't such a thing as an indoor cat. All cats that were kept as pets either lived completely outside, or they were indoor-outdoor cats that had to either be let in and out or had access to a kitty door. Now, the purpose of this lecture isn't to lecture, so to speak, on keeping your cats indoors, but I will give one strong public service announcement to please keep your cats indoors. There are many, many reasons why it's better for your cat to stay indoors, and I'm happy to discuss with anyone after the lecture, but I strongly encourage you to keep your cats indoors. And if you really feel it's important to give your cat outdoor time, they can learn to be on a leash, even walked on a leash, or some people build outdoor enclosures called catios that you can Google. But it is estimated that outdoor cats kill 4 billion with a B birds around the world annually, and about 25 billion mammals. Plus, the average life expectancy for an outdoor cat is only 2 to 5 years. It doesn't mean yours isn't going to live longer. It's better for the cat, better for you, and better for the world if you do keep your cat indoors. So, what led to the concept of having an indoor cat? There were 3 necessary factors that needed to happen. First is refrigeration. So with refrigeration, you could start to keep meat in the house to feed the little carnivores. Second, spaying and neutering, because from what I understand, keeping an unspayed or unneutered cat in the house can be a really messy, unpleasant experience when they go into heat or they detect another cat in heat. And the final piece of the puzzle was commercial kitty litter. In the 1940s, people did have litter boxes for their indoor-outdoor cats, and it was usually filled with things like sand or sawdust or ashes or shredded newspapers. But if you read the biography, in 1947, a man by the name of Ed Lowe, who lived in Michigan, received a knock on the door from his neighbor who said that the sand she used for her litter box was frozen, and this could only happen in the Midwest, and it was frozen and she didn't want to use it because the ash pile, she didn't like the way her cat tracked the ash all over the house. So Ed didn't have sand, but he did loan her some Fuller's Earth kiln-dried earth clay instead. And apparently it worked so well that he started packaging it and selling it under the brand name Kitty Litter. And in a bit of marketing genius, he gave packages to pet stores at no cost and told them to give them away for free to their customers to build up demand. And pretty soon it was a household brand, and it made Mr. Lowe a rich person. He later sold the company to Purina after it had been rebranded as Tidy Cats. And at the time of his death, the business was valued at $500 million. Most kitty litter today have switched from clay-based to silica-based litter, but that can apparently have a negative impact on your lungs and your health. So now many cat owners are encouraged to buy vegetable-based cat litter, but you have to do that research. Okay. So now it's time to look at some of the fun cat adaptations and behaviors. So starting with the cat's tail, 27 of the cat's 244 bones are in the tail, which is used primarily for balance and helping the cat to get in and out of tight places. When falling, the tail does help the cat to turn over in midair, much like a squirrel that's jumping in midair. You'll see that cat, the tail kind of help with balance. Is it true that cats always land on their feet? Unfortunately not, but most of the time they do, which likely gave rise to the idea that cats have 9 lives. One of my favorite parts of cat anatomy is that they have a detached clavicle or collarbone, which allows a cat to squeeze through some really tight spaces they wouldn't if that collarbone was kind of jutting out. And because the clavicle is detached, cats, whether it be a house cat or a mountain lion or a tiger, have that really cool motion and rhythm where the shoulder blades move in parallel with the front legs. So try to look for that next time you see a cat walking around, how the shoulder blades kind of move up and down in your cat, but not in your dog. Cat hair can have extremely intricate patterns, and there are 4 different kinds of hair on a cat. There's an inner layer called down, just like downy feathers on a goose, primarily for insulation. There's a middle layer called awn hairs, which kind of serve a mixed purpose of insulation and protection. And then there's an outer layer called guard hairs, which are the ones that we primarily feel when we pet a cat. And those are mostly for protection. And the final type of cat hairs are called vibrissae, also known as whiskers, which are extremely sensitive. So public service announcement number 2, please don't pull a cat's whiskers, and definitely don't try to trim them. There's a lot of nerve endings there, and not only would it be painful, but they would lose their functionality. So why are whiskers important? For one thing, they're about the same width of the cat's body when compressed. So the cat can use its whiskers to estimate if its body will fit through an opening. So you'll sometimes see cats first stick their heads into space, and if the whiskers clear, then there's a good chance that the rest of the body will clear so they can kind of risk trying to squeeze through without getting stuck. But here's something I did not know. Whiskers are so sensitive that they can sense air pressure changes. So when they're running full speed in dark conditions, when most of us would run into everything, including our dogs, when the cats come to an object like a wall or a couch, those whiskers are actually able to sense the object based on the changes in air surrounding that object. So extremely sensitive and useful. And they're also used in communication. If they're pulled back, that often indicates agitation or anger or irritation. And if they're in the normal position, that means the cat is content or at least somewhere in a neutral state. Okay, on to the next body part, paws. Unlike dogs, cats have extremely flexible paws that they can bend them into fists and flex them, and they're super agile, which helps them when they're climbing, when they're hunting. It's useful in grooming, and it also helps a cat regulate its body temperature. So, unlike dog paws, which are much stiffer, the cat paws are very multifunctional. They're sensitive to heat and to vibrations in the ground, and that may alert them to the presence of potential prey approaching them. And then that would trigger those famous retractable claws to come out of those protective sheaths. Another thing dogs can't do, which brings us to public service announcement number 3. Please don't declaw your kitty. It's not the same as trimming a nail. It's equivalent to kind of cutting off the tip of your finger at the first knuckle. It's painful, it's not necessary, and it's bad for the cat in many ways. Before we move from the parts of a cat to cat behaviors, I'll bring up a slightly disturbing topic that's a reality for cat owners, but I also want to preface it with the science behind this topic is not conclusive. So this isn't meant to scare anyone like I did with the snail parasites in the snail episode. But if you have a cat, you've probably heard of Toxoplasmosis gondii, which is a protozoan parasite found in cat feces that is easily transmitted to humans. It is now so prevalent because cats are such a popular pet that it is estimated that 1 in 3 adults worldwide host this parasite in their body, particularly in their muscles, their eyes, and their brain tissue. You probably heard that pregnant women shouldn't change litter boxes because the parasite can cause birth defects. And there's a little more subtle and sinister effect that the parasite may be having on humanity. Recent studies have shown that toxoplasmosis may be associated with subtle changes in personality, more conspicuous changes in behavior, such as IED or intermittent explosive disorder, which often manifests itself as road rage, and an increased risk of psychiatric illness, especially schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and addiction. But again, there's a lot we don't know, and there's a long latency, and many people don't harbor it, even if it enters them. So it likely affects people differently based on genes and other things. And so you may never really see any of these issues manifest themselves, even if you harbor it. And even if they do, they're probably subtle and complex. So you probably wouldn't trace it back to the kitty litter. But because human behavior is so complex, and it'll probably be a while before we have a better understanding of the effects. But in mice, interestingly, toxoplasmosis likely manifests itself to make the mouse become more bold, which then makes it easier for cats to prey on them, which makes it easier for the parasite to complete its life cycle. But again, complex, still a lot we don't know about it, particularly in humans. Okay, now back to a more fun topic, cat behaviors. Starting with my all-time favorite, the cat massage, or what the Stuff You Should Know hosts call the making biscuits or kneading dough behavior, where a cat alternates paw to paw on a pillow or maybe your lap, back and forth as if it's kneading bread or making biscuits. Sometimes the claws are out, usually they're in. And why do they do this? There are a couple theories. The first one, and my favorite one, is that it's a comfort behavior in which they harken back to what they did as a kitten when they were nursing and bonding with their mother. When nursing, kittens push back and forth on the area around the nipple. It helps the milk flow, much like we do when we're milking a cow. And which brings us to public service announcement number 4. Don't feed your cat milk. Milk comes from a cow, which is, in case you didn't know, is a completely different species. And cats can't digest cow's milk. But we saw in the Tom and Jerry cartoons, that cats were always fed milk. But it is, in fact, pretty bad for them. So, because they can't digest it. But that first theory behind the massaging behavior is that it's a comfort and a bonding behavior. A second theory is that they're marking their scent or claiming ownership over an object or a territory. There are quite a few scent glands in a cat's paws. And so by pushing back and forth, they're releasing their scent, claiming ownership over your lap or your pillow or a dog. So here's another minute of Zen that we all may need to watch today. And you can decide which is the better explanation as we watch this short video. And you're welcome for that. Another cat behavior is the headbutt, which may serve a similar purpose as the kneading dough. When you pet a cat, you probably notice the way they shove their head into your hand or your face. Or if they're really into it, they may shove the corner of their mouth into your hand. And this again has to do with scent glands on their head and mouth, and undoubtedly also has a bonding purpose. But this one's a little more straightforward. They're marking you. They're letting all the other cats know that you belong to them. And they're also at the same time picking up scents from you, from your hand. So if you visited a neighbor's cat and pet it, your cat's gonna know. So you better be ready for the consequences, because your neighbor's cat was trying to mask the scent of your cat with its own. So scent glands in the paws, the head, and the mouth serve an important role in communication, but there's also the kind of butt in your face, and that's not so much giving you scent, it's giving you the opportunity to see what they've been doing. So it's kind of like, here, I found out what you're doing, here you can smell my butt and see what I've been up to. But there's another form of scent communication that's a little more obvious, and this one comes in the form of back into an object, lift your tail, and spray. This is a much less subtle form of marking territory than the scent glands. And if a cat does this in your house, you're apparently in for a treat, because although sometimes it's just straight up pee that comes out, more often they're spraying this putrid mixture, this viscous kind of fatty, very smelly, musky material. So if you spay or neuter your cat, which would be public service announcement number 5 or 6, early, that usually eliminates most spraying behavior in your house. Although sometimes fixed cats will do a kind of mimic spray where they actually do all the motions, they back up to your couch, they raise their tail and quiver, but nothing actually sprays out. But this behavior usually is for marking territory, and it can be triggered by stress. or maybe as revenge for you petting the neighbor's cat that you did earlier. The next behavior is the purr. Um, all domestic cats and some wild cats, as I mentioned earlier, purr, and apparently so can raccoons. And usually this means what you think it means, that you have a content cat. And if you listen closely, that purr never stops because they purr on both the inhale and the exhale, like the circular breathing, for a nice, soothing, continuous, relaxing purr. Sometimes a cat will purr when they're upset or startled or injured, but most of the time a cat purr is what we think it is. There are a couple behaviors in cats that you don't want to see normally. One of these is drooling and the other is panting. And if you see either of these behaviors, there might be an underlying stress. And I would encourage you to contact your animal health professional. Although there are some cats that are prone to drooling as a normal behavior, even when they're healthy. Another interesting result of cat anatomy, and by the way, all of these behaviors we're talking about now are also true in the wild cats. So it's a pretty cool evolutionary adaptations that they just brought into our houses. But cats have a higher thermoneutral zone, which than we do, and that's the temperature at which their body is most efficient in terms of metabolism. So it's probably the most comfortable temperature for them. So for humans, it's probably low 70s, maybe higher, maybe lower for individuals. But for cats, it's about 10 degrees higher in the low 80s. So there's a reason why cats look for those sun rays, or curl up in a box, or snuggle up to your laptop in particular. They like to be warm. Anyway, I can't end a talk on cats without mentioning catnip. So catnip is a legitimate drug for cats. They can either inhale it, which causes some cats to go completely crazy, or they can eat it, which has the opposite effect, which is a more mellowing effect. And only about half of cats are sensitive to catnip. So, and there's also an effect of where they can get used to it. So if your cat has no effect by it, it's probably in its genes. If it does go crazy for it, if you keep it exposed to it, that craziness will go down. But if you kind of take it away and give it to them again, the effect is stronger. And you can grow catnip in your yard. It's a type of mint, but I would caution you doing that because it's a very aggressive invasive plant, and I spend many hours in my backyard trying to keep it at bay. And I'm really excited because we had our first listener request and photos. Thank you, Jenny. She wanted to know why cats love to shove themselves into tiny spaces like boxes. And the answer likely has to do that boxes give cats a sense of security and comfort. So in the wild, they're often hiding in places where they can see out what's happening in the world and trying to keep the world from seeing them, particularly when they're hunting for prey. So that's really no different than putting themselves in a box so they can ambush your leg as you walk by. And studies show that cats in shelters exhibit less stress when given boxes. And it also helps them to retain body heat that I mentioned before, which is, all of these factors play in, but it's likely that the biggest one is the sense of security and protection. And this request helped me pick one of the last two videos to share for this talk, because there could be hundreds and hundreds of videos, but this one in particular led me to this video, which I'm excited to watch with you. So we'll end with a final public service announcement from my favorite public service announcer, Josh Clark. I think he's kind of an acquired taste, but I love him. And thank you for watching. And I look forward to seeing you again next week, where the topic will be wild turkeys. So if you have any turkey questions, please send them my way, or stories or pictures. And enjoy the beautiful weather. So we'll end here with Josh.
Hello and welcome to Don't Be Dumb. Thanks for joining me. I'm Josh Clark. Have you ever seen a cat and gone, "Hey, can you taste sweet things?" That's a weird question, but here's the answer. No. See, we humans can taste 5 general categories of things: salty, sweet, umami, bitter, and sour. And we can taste sweet things because we have a pair of genes, the TAS1R2 gene and the TAS1R3 gene. And these genes encode a protein that allows us to taste sweet. But cats don't have this pair of genes or any other genes that allows them to taste sweet, as far as humans can tell. And it turns out that cats don't even have a way to metabolize sweet things. So when they eat starches and sugars, it's bad for them. Which is why cats get diabetes when you feed them pudding. And it turns out that cats aren't the only animals that can't taste sweet. Chickens can't either. So the next time you see somebody feeding a cat something sweet, you set them straight and tell them Josh sent you. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, everyone.
Do you know somebody?
Sharing my screen, and you're welcome to put your camera back on so I can see you, and